What's up, everybody? We have come to the conclusion of the longest trial we have covered to date on YouTube. That's right. We have a verdict in the YSL case today. We are going to react to. We're going to watch it happen. We're going to discuss what it means from a lawyer's perspective to sit there with your client and wait for a verdict like this. We're also going to discuss what it's like for a lawyer to have pled a client out, taken a plea deal while waiting for the jury to deliberate or during trial, and then finding out what the verdict actually is. We're going to talk about what it's going to be like for the state attorney's office, what this means for them, and what it means for the defendants that still have not gone to trial yet, that are wrapped up in all this. There's so much going on in this case, and we're going to bring a lawyer's perspective as to what has happened and what we think is going to happen in the future. I've got my dad joining me today. Thank you guys for being here. Hit that like button, and we're going to get to it. So we're going to jump right in with the verdict, and don't blink, because if you do, you might miss it. It's one of the quickest verdicts I've ever heard read in court. Not a lot of drama or lead up, especially with how long the case has gone. So we're going to jump in. We're going to listen to this verdict, Dad, and then we'll get your reaction right off the top. But first, let's hear from the judge.
Form is dated December 2nd. Is that because that's when you all reached the verdict with regard to him? Okay. And then Mr. Stillwell's is dated today. Okay. All right.
Sorry, I'll pause it because you mentioned this off the top. So they actually reached verdicts on the defendants on 2 different days, December 2nd and December 3rd, which is very interesting. I'll let you comment on it in a second. I just wanted to highlight that for the jury. That's what she was just reading. They were signed on 2 different days.
Mr. Kendrick, you have been found not guilty on all charges. Mr. Stillwell, can you please stand? You have been found guilty on count 64, possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, and not guilty on every other charge. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you are officially released from further service, and I cannot express the degree of thanks that Fulton County owes you for your service. Given the length of this trial, you have paid close attention this entire time, and I appreciate your devotion, as I'm sure do the parties in this case. You are welcome to stay for the sentencing, or you can return to the jury room. I would like to speak with you in just a moment in the jury room. If you all do want to stay, you're welcome to stay. Is there any objection to the form or the legality of this verdict? No. Any from the defense? All right. All right. Is there any reason?
Absolutely not from the defense. Okay, so let me see if I do this. No, that doesn't help. I'll just do this for now for a second so we can talk about it. So guilty of just the firearm offense, felon in possession of a firearm, but not guilty on all the big stuff. And he was sentenced to time served on that. It's supposed to be 10 years, I guess, as a minimum, but she downward departed and gave him time served, which I think he's been in a couple years, right?
They're allowed to give them probation in lieu of jail in Georgia. She gave him 2 years prison and I think 8 years probation, but he'd already served 2 years. So he was out immediately, and he's going to be still on probation when he gets out. She can't, that's a minimum mandatory because he's a recidivist. And they filed a particular motion called a recidivism motion requiring her to give him, to sentence him to the maximum sentence, but she can give him probation in lieu of prison.
Yeah. And recidivism means like he's committed other crimes before. And so this is an additional crime on top of it. That's why you can do that minimum mandatory. But again, 8 years probation is a heck of a lot better than 8 years. So why don't you talk a little bit about how you found it interesting that the verdicts were signed on 2 different days?
Well, I think Stillwell came that close to either a hung jury or a guilty. And the reason I'm saying that is, first off, the day before they'd already come to a verdict on Kendrick. So they still waited another day and they're still arguing about Stillwell. Secondly, jury questions. They asked for specific lyrics that Stillwell sang to be read back to them, as well as some video of Stillwell. So there were some people on there looking for reasons to convict Stillwell. And if I was Stillwell's lawyer, I would have been real nervous with those questions. But they came around and they got a unanimous verdict of not guilty. So whoever those holdouts were, whatever they repeated in those lyrics, or they also played some undercover wiretap conversations, not undercover, but wiretap conversations. It didn't convince them that he was guilty, but he came close.
And do you think potentially with that, it was a bit of a splitting the baby or compromise that they were going to give him at least one guilty verdict on the weapons charge, and maybe that's why some jurors were okay eventually with not guilty on everything else?
You know, the studies you read show that that is the case a lot of times.
Juries like to compromise.
Well, some of those people were, you know, I just can't let this guy walk out. And they'll go, look, he's not going to walk out. We'll find him guilty on this one charge, because that kind of a no-brainer charge, felon in possession of a firearm. You think about it. You're a convicted felon. Yes. You have a firearm. Yes. That's it. You know, it's not all the conspiracies. It's not all the racketeering. It's not all the other garbage that they had to prove. They just had to prove those two things, and he's guilty. So those jurors felt better about the not guilty verdict, even though they thought he might have done something wrong.
Yeah, I definitely think that comes into the psychology of a juror as well. But obviously they were looking at the evidence and they weren't going to convict if they didn't feel like the state proved beyond reasonable doubt, because it was a not guilty on the other defendant sitting there. So were you surprised at the verdict?
No.
Why?
I wasn't. I think that in our prior programs when we talked, I think that I mentioned things like these witnesses that took the stand and did not give the state what they wanted, did not prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. The state was trying to prove their case indirectly through prior transcripts or prior videos, but not through the witnesses on the stand. And the length of the trial also is a real problem for the state, in that these people have to remember all the details. And the breaks. Before the last group of testimony, before they just had two defendants left, there was a 2-week break, just about. So that jury was out for 2 weeks, comes back, and there's only two defendants sitting there. And the judge in her instructions says to them, you are not to take that into consideration. You are not to concern yourself with the fact that all these other defendants are gone. Well, you can say that, but it doesn't surprise me. I don't think the evidence was there. I think they put on a rotten case, totally disingenuous, totally mixed up, and just going all over the place. Nothing, not nothing. I'm sure they had some witnesses that worked out for them, but a whole lot of important witnesses did not work out for them the way they wanted. I just don't think it's the kind of case where people could say beyond a reasonable doubt the state had proved their case.
Yeah, and I think it does add some more confidence in the justice system, because we've seen RICO cases where the state will use it to try to get everything in and pile on. And it's like, okay, they're definitely convicting these guys or gals or people or person, whatever. It's like they're just piling all these bad acts and all these things they did wrong. Is it a crime? Maybe not. Is it outside statute of limitations? It would have been if not for RICO, but they just pile on top, and it's like, oof, just get it over with. We know they're going to be guilty. This was the exact opposite of that, where they overtried the case, way too much in it, discombobulated, didn't make sense, not streamlined, just nowhere near a prosecution that should result in a guilty verdict in our American criminal justice system, in my opinion. And that's really where it comes down to innocent or not proven. This one was 100% not proven. We never even got to guilt or innocence, to me, in my opinion, because the facts were so poorly laid out by the state, and we don't need to get there. As a judicial system, we don't need to get there because it was absolutely not proven. That's my opinion.
I think it's possible that they could have proven their case. I think it's possible that they could have gotten a a guilty verdict if they had just done what they should have done, streamlined it, made it compact so it's easy to understand, and got rid of the woodies and put these guys on the stand who are going to totally deny that they ever said anything bad. How do you put witnesses on the stand like that? I don't understand. How do you put witnesses on the stand? They're going to say something totally different than what you expect them to say. It was such a badly tried case that maybe good prosecutors doing a good job, might have convicted him, but no way that these guys are going to convict him.
Yeah, and a lot of people want to know what these defense lawyers and family members think. And somebody sent us a video of a press conference. I have not watched the entirety of it yet, so we'll get a little live reaction here. But let's take a listen to this together, and just we're going to talk about what this means for the lawyers, what it's like for the lawyers. People are saying our mics are skipping out. He sounds fine to me. I don't know how we can fix it. All right. Somebody said or Kelsey told me it's back to normal now. So, all right, we are going to play this video and you guys can let me know if the mics are going in and out, and I will try to fix it.
About turning his life around and having a second chance at life and making it mean something and being there for one's children and for one's family. So I'm just so happy, excited for Shannon. I'm happy and excited for his grandmother, who I was able to hug, and I'm happy for his kids, and I'm just very hopeful that this is a turning point and there's great things coming in the future.
Max, is this a fair and just verdict, do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely. The jurors, we asked so much of the jurors, and they really scrutinized the evidence, and they demanded real evidence, and it wasn't there. And so we are thankful for the jurors, and it's just a great day.
Did you have a chance to talk to the jurors?
I did, and I'm not going to comment on the discussions with the jurors, but I will just say I think
So he said he did talk to the jurors, but he's not going to comment on his discussion with the jurors, but he felt like they did a good job looking into it, going through all the evidence, and they came out with a just verdict.
The fact that they deliberated for 4 days, and also that just the amount of time that they put in, they certainly scrutinized everything and they did their jobs as jurors, and we are appreciative of that and so thankful.
Can you reiterate again what he only found guilty on one charge and what that means for the future, him being released, all that stuff?
So he was found guilty of possession of a firearm on March 17th, not the day of any other crimes. It was the day that he was arrested. And there was a gun that was registered to his girlfriend that was found near the scene of where he was arrested. And that's what he was convicted of. Judge Whitaker, we are so thankful to her for having an open mind. A lot of times when you take a case to
I assume that's going to be a common theme, the praise for Judge Whitaker, not just with the how she handled the trial, but the plea deals, the sentence, all across the board. Were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say, you wonder, these guys, the press guys, the kind of questions they ask. That guy back there goes, do you feel it was a fair and just verdict? What did he expect the answer to be from the criminal defense lawyer about whether that's a fair and just verdict? But again, throughout this trial, she was fair. Again, I know some people thought that she gave rulings that were pro-prosecution, but to be fair, you got to go both ways sometimes. You can't just rule one way all the time. And she did that, and she was fair. And I mean, you saw from the sentence that she gave Thug, that was a real roll of the dice. The fact that he pled open with no deal, you talk about a roll of the dice, that was a roll of the dice.
Everybody is saying if you refresh your app or go out and come back in, the audio is fixed. So everybody, not you, Dad, just, I don't want to refresh ours because, and Chris said he refreshed it and it fixed it. So everybody refresh your app if you're having the problem. GMZ and everybody else, refresh the app and that should fix the audio. But I'm not going to comment on the audio anymore unless Kelsey tells me it's messed up, because it completely brings me out of focus to what we're talking about. So let's keep listening to the video here.
Trial is you just get the maximum sentence for daring to take on the state. Judge Whitaker did not see it that way.
Sorry, I have to pause it again because that's something that's so important in trials. He said sometimes judges in the state attorney's office will punish you for daring to take on the state and actually exercise your right to a fair trial. And yet she did not do that. How important is that? How often do you feel like that happens to us?
About 1%.
No, sorry. I have to interrupt you here. I think you answered it inversely. How often does it happen to us where we feel like we're punished for our clients going to trial?
Oh, 99%.
Exactly. Right.
I mean,
All right,
I
go
know.
ahead. Finish.
I thought it the other way. Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. I've never well, I can't say that. There have been really, really rare occasions where going to trial opened the judge's eyes to really what the case was about. But that rarely happens. In 99% of the cases, you'll get a heavier sentence if you go to trial than if you would have pled before, because judges, that what they'll say is the first step to rehabilitation is to admit that you're wrong. And if you don't want to admit you're wrong, then you'll get a heavier sentence. So that's why judges encourage you to plead. It also means that judge doesn't have to work, doesn't have to go to trial, doesn't have to put the state through the expense of a trial. And therefore, you've saved all that if you plead guilty. So that's the benefit that you get.
Yeah, and again, there's some legitimacy to taking responsibility and that affecting your sentence and affecting the process. But a lot of times, state attorneys will for sure use against you the fact that your client wants to go to trial because they're not either offering a fair deal or they're maintaining their innocence. And if they're maintaining their innocence, I'm not sure how that would affect certain plea offers that are made by certain state attorneys. But it's like you said, 99% of the time it's held against us, like Attorney Shardt just said here.
She gave Mr. Stillwell a time-served sentence for the time that he has served, followed by probation. Mr. Stillwell has a couple, or I think one other criminal matter that needs to be resolved. I am hopeful and optimistic. It's nothing like this case. It's a case that was picked up while incarcerated. And we're hopeful that there will be a quick resolution to that case and Mr. Stillwell will be able to get back to his life and his children and his family.
You think he'll be home by Christmas? Is that
I'm hoping. Okay. That's not unrealistic.
I know you don't want to get it.
So he's not actually going home today because of some unrelated or some other criminal matter. But if it was just this case, he could go home today. Ish. Probably still has to be processed.
Exactly what the juror said. What do you think their one sticking point was?
I don't think there was one sticking point. I don't think there was. You know, so many people have been watching this case. You know, in opening, I said from the beginning about the witnesses in blue suits and wearing the Fulton County blues, and I think the world got to see how cases can be built the wrong way. Just finding people that are prone to lie and talking to them at their most desperate time to try to get them to say things about other people. And I think that's what happened here. And I think the jurors recognize that. And of course, regarding the 2022 case, that was on video. And I think we explained what we saw in the video. And I think the jurors likely saw the same thing.
What kind of message should this verdict send to the taxpayers of Fulton County?
Oh, I don't know about all that. The message that was sent to me is my client has a second chance at life, and we're just so thankful for that. And I know he is, and we are also just so thankful to the press for covering this and all the people that at some point the public began to root for us. And that did make a difference, and we appreciate all the people that have been supporting us throughout this process, this long journey.
So we're going to listen to more of this, but just on that comment with taxpayer dollars, let's talk about the state attorney's office for a second. So you were a supervisor at the state attorney's office, the supervisor at the U.S. attorney's office, which is federal prosecutors. I was never a boss at the state attorney's office. So what is it like when something like this happens? I'm sure nothing to this level happened while you were there, but there had to be losses. There had to be tough losses, maybe some embarrassing losses, even if it wasn't for you, from somebody that you supervised or a decision you made on a case. How does the state attorney's office deal with something like this generally? And then specifically, how do you think this office is going to deal with it?
Well, the way you deal with it is you move on to the next case. You don't sit there and you cry over losing a case. Every lawyer who's a litigator, who's a trial lawyer, you'll win some and you lose some. And when it's over, you move on to the next case. So if you let this loss affect your next case, you're not doing the job for the people as the state attorney's office. And as a state attorney, you're supposed to say to yourself, I'm the minister of justice. So if justice was served, regardless of what the verdict was, guilty or not guilty, I've done my job. That's justice. I move on to the next case to seek justice. Again, that's what an ethical prosecutor does. I don't know if that's what this office is going to do or not do. By the way they tried this case, I have some concerns about whether or not they're ministers of justice or not. And they really do view things as, look, if I have a case, I'll try it. I'm not going to charge a case I don't have. And in this case, they really had some problems in the very beginning before they even charged this case. And it's obvious they didn't do a full investigation because they put a lot of witnesses on they'd never talked to before. So I'm kind of concerned about the way this office will view it. But if they do the right thing, they just move on to the next case. This is in the past. Now, a problem they have is they have some pending cases, and they have some people, that they have to try in the future. They're going to have to make some decisions about whether or not the taxpayers' money is being used wisely on those cases now.
Yeah, and we are going to get to that. That is going to be a section we talk about. But I think some people in that office either need to lose their jobs or need more education on how to do things in a courtroom ethically. And I know some of that's been forced on some of these prosecutors. I think a lot of them need it. And I hope, what I will say, I hope that they learned lessons. That's what I hope happens. I hope everybody in this prosecutor's office, in this county, in this state, in this country, everybody on both sides of the aisle, prosecutors, state attorneys, and judges, learned from watching this trial. That's what's so cool to me about YouTube. That's what's so cool about the new interest that people have in actually taking part and paying attention to the justice system. And the people that complain about that, I have such negative feelings about, because it's like, oh, you don't want all these people to watch and pay attention and have an opinion on the justice system that literally affects them and their family members. So few people go out and vote for judges and prosecutors, like the state attorney or whatever it may be, or realize that presidents and governors appoint judges and prosecutors. This stuff is important and affects people probably more than the president does, right? I mean, maybe I'm going a little overboard there, but like, local judges and prosecutors have a big effect on your life. And people don't want other people to pay attention to that, or citizens to pay attention to that, because they're not lawyers, or because they don't like their opinion on a case. Too bad. Do better. That's what I would say. If you don't want them to see how you act in the courtroom as a prosecutor or judge, do better, because these are the people that matter. These are the people it affects. And this case highlighted that to me.
Well, it's a horrible situation. And we just had an election, and you and I both know there are a lot of people out there that don't even bother to find out about the judges they're voting for. Or, that is this person a good judge? Is he a fair person? Has he done a good job? Will he do a good job? We have a lot of people who ask us, because they know we know, should I vote for this judge, or which judge should I vote for? But those people out there that don't take the time don't realize how someday their life could really be directly impacted by the vote they make or don't make in the next election for, again, they call it the down ticket, for those people that are further down from the president that they vote for, that how they could affect their daily lives.
Yeah. And I mean, imagine being a family member of any of these defendants and what you think of Judge Glanville, or versus what you think of Whitaker now. Right. And you could potentially have, depending on the jurisdiction that you're in, you could have an effect on that. Brian B asked, why wasn't the jury polled? She didn't ask, right?
No, she didn't ask. Nobody, and nobody asked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Emily said, would love to have you get Nothing Doug and Max on for an episode. Would love to. I actually just messaged Doug Weinstein on Twitter to see if he will be my podcast guest. I don't think I've had any interaction with Max. Would love to have him on too. I'd love to just pick their brain about what they thought about this whole process, and, really dig into some questions that, lawyers have to deal with in this process. It's not just all, amazing and they got to win, but a win isn't maybe what some people feel like a win is for criminal defense lawyers, because we know all that our client has gone throughout this process just to get here.
And I tell you, right now, they're on a high. They're on an adrenaline high when they leave that courtroom. They won the longest trial in Georgia history, but they're going to go home, and in a couple of days, they're going to crash. They're going to go to bed. They're going to sleep. They're going to sleep for a week. But right now they're on a high. But this was emotionally draining, physically draining. I'll bet you that their health was affected. I bet you their family life was affected. And so they're going to be very glad it's over.
Yeah, I mean, the adrenaline crash after a trial, after a 1 week trial is amazing. I can't imagine what it's going to be like here. Chris asked, do you think the sentence of the judge handed down reflects how she felt about the case? Not just this sentence, but the sentence she gave to the defendants that pled open to the court, I think absolutely tells you what she thinks about this case. What do you think, Dad?
Oh, absolutely. It was overtried, overcharged, and that sitting in that trial for 10 months, in her opinion, was punishment enough. And so, yeah, no, there's no doubt she was not happy about the case or the prosecution or the quality of the evidence.
What are your thoughts on a legal assistant being on the jury? The last trial I had, it was a civil trial. We had a criminal defense paralegal on that trial. I don't have a problem with it if both sides think they can be fair and unbiased. She was an alternate juror. Also emailed you the video of the foreperson speaking out. I'll have to check that out, Danielle. We'll get jury reactions if they come out, and that'll probably have to be future videos. If you don't know lawyers, how do you find out about a judge? So I'll give my answer, Dad. I'm sure you'll have more. Research them. Look them up. Look at what kind of work experience they have. Have they worked on both sides? Have they had clients? Have they just been a government worker forever? And if they have, what have they done while they've worked at the state attorney's office or, in the legislature or wherever it is that they have worked? Do they have a well-rounded resume? And after you look at their resume, think, do you have anybody that may have crossed paths with them, not just as a lawyer, but anybody that worked in this office or worked in that arena, and try to get as much information on them as you can. It's really not as hard as you may think.
No. And there are special interest groups out there that send questionnaires out to these judicial candidates that they fill them out. For instance, if you believe in one particular, you're a conservative, you're a liberal, whatever you are, there is an interest group that a special interest group that did a survey of these judges, and you can find that survey online somewhere, so you can see how they are on certain issues.
Peter, completely unrelated, during Ashley Benefield's sentencing this AM, the judge kept saying downward departure. What is that about? Well, guess what? I'm going to do a video on that tonight, and Point Blank Guns and Ammo asked as well. Yes, I'm going to be doing a video on that tonight. That's a big topic that I discussed. So hold your hats and wait for that one. All right, let's get back to the interview here with the attorneys. And then there's some family members here as well that speak.
I mean, and I don't mean to, we know that Shannon was stabbed in the stomach earlier in this trial while this trial was going on. We know we had to break for a week, or at least a week, might have been 2 weeks for his recovery. I was the only person allowed to go see him in the hospital. And so that was, and then Mr. Kendrick was stabbed in the head recently. So obviously those are serious, and we got to make sure we take care of people, especially people that are not even convicted of anything. And so that's I think it's something we need to address. I'm not blaming any particular person, but it's something as a society and as a city we need to take care of.
Just your reaction, what happened?
All right, so that was Max Shardt. This is Doug Weinstein.
Diamante and I I want to say we were surprised because given that the jury had clearly been looking at all the evidence, we thought that this was the only outcome they could really come to. But nevertheless, we were thrilled. Just he's looking forward to getting out, getting back to his music, getting back to his family, all the supporters he's had, all the prayers, all the love. It's been wonderful. And I didn't say this earlier to everybody else, but I have got to thank Judge Whitaker. The entire case changed when she took over. We got a fair trial. And anyway, it's just a wonderful experience.
No, I ain't no regrets. No regrets.
All right, so this is Young Thug's dad, I believe, from a prior interview that we watched. So before we get to that, let me ask you this question. What does it feel like to be a lawyer? This has never happened to me either, so glad you're here to answer this one. To plead out a case with a defendant or be on the other side, right? If you have been, to take a plea deal while other people are still waiting for their verdict and they get it, or to see other people take a plea deal and wait there with your client to see what the end result is. What is that like? What discussions are you having with clients? And what do you think Young Thug and Brian Steele and all the other defendants and lawyers that took deals prior for a bird in the hand where they got to go home, but technically pled guilty to crimes that these two defendants were found not guilty on similar crimes?
Well, it's an awful feeling. It's a risk that you take, and it's the biggest gamble. Get rid of criminal defense lawyers, civil defense lawyers, civil trial lawyers. They do important work, but it's all money. And when you're doing, a criminal defense case,
I agree, but I won't interrupt you.
okay, it's all about money. When you do a criminal defense case, you're talking about a person's freedom, or you're talking about his life. And so there's a lot
You don't
riding.
get paid. You don't get paid for that.
Well, I get
checked. You still get paid. Yeah,
I get paid, and I always
we don't
walk
have to have that discussion in front of the people.
and I always walk out of the courtroom.
Yeah,
but
okay.
but you've got a person's life in your hands, and so if you plead him guilty to a charge and other co-defendants are still going to trial, then you've got a tremendous amount of stress, because what if they're found not guilty and you had your client plead guilty and be sentenced, and your client looks at you if they're found not guilty and they say, "What did you do to me? I mean, I trusted you with my life and look what you did." That's never happened to me. I've got to say, I have pled guilty, clients guilty during the trial, but all the time later on, the verdicts were guilty for the other defendants. So the decision to plead guilty and take the deal was always a good decision. I've also had a situation where a verdict came in on my client of another person's client of not guilty. Yet the jury was still making a decision on my client. So we sat there for days, not guilty over here, waiting for what's going to happen. And if my client was found guilty and that person was found guilty, then, I'd kind of work, they'd look at me and say, what kind of lawyer are you? Fortunately, they eventually came back with not guilty on my client. But it's the stress that it's hard to imagine the stress of, for instance, just waiting for a verdict. When you're trying a case, your mind is always working on the trial, cross-examining witnesses, on the evidence, on the arguments to the judge, on your objections. Your mind is occupied. When that is all over and the closing argument is done, and there's nothing more you can do to affect the case, and you have to sit there and wait for a verdict, that is the worst time for a lawyer. That is the most stressful time. So those decisions you're talking about, pleading guilty, hoping that you made the right decision, those are, that's what you get. You're talking about getting paid. That's what you get paid for, to make those decisions. So it's a very tough time, a tough decision, but lawyers have to do it. It's their job.
And a lot of times, like Brian Steele in this case, it wouldn't have been his decision, but it was his client's decision.
Right.
So he still has to live with it. They still have to see this not guilty verdict, and they still have to deal with it. So have you ever had that happen where you've either taken a plea deal or not taken a plea deal when another defendant has?
So I've taken a plea deal. Yes, I have had that situation.
Okay. What side? So have you taken a plea deal while the other defendant still waited for the verdict?
Yes, but the verdict was always a guilty. I've never had a situation where I took a plea deal and the verdict was innocent, so that I look like I made the wrong decision.
Okay.
That never happened. It was always the right decision, and the person was found guilty, so I didn't look like I made the wrong decision.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. And again, I wouldn't say that they look like they made the wrong decision. I think that, especially the lawyers in this case, they felt very confident in the not guilty verdict. But at the end of the day, the case was lasting forever. There was no telling it was only going to be 30 more days. And they decided to make a decision. And we got to remember, a lot of these defendants, especially potentially Young Thug, there was different evidence, different people being pointed the finger at as being the leader of all of this, being the big fish. So there's no guarantee. It's probably likely it would have been not guilty on most of these charges, but there's no guarantee. So he still got a guarantee and was able to go home. What would have been the kick in the gut to me is, even though one of the defendants was found guilty on the gun charge with a 10-year minimum mandatory, he still went home, right? So it's possible you could have gotten a guilty verdict on one of the charges, not guilty on most of them, and still ended up going home if you would have waited it out. But at the end of the day, I feel confident saying that Young Thug was properly advised of what he was giving up and what he was waiving, and he made a knowing decision to waive the opportunity to stand there and potentially have the jury say not guilty. I think his lawyers explained that to him, and he still made the decision that he felt was best for him and his family. I do feel confident in saying that.
Right. Well, like you said, I think Steele made it very clear that if it was his decision, that's not the decision he would have made, that it was his client's decision. And we all know as lawyers, there are certain things that clients have the ultimate decision on. And one of those things is whether to plead guilty or not. So it's the client's decision, not the lawyer's decision. And you're right. There's no doubt Thug was well informed. I am sure that Mr. Steele went through it with him over and over again, probably beat him over the head with it to make sure he understood what he was doing. Because I think Mr. Steele wanted to make sure that Thug understood what he was doing. Mm-hmm. And the chances and the risk is because he didn't want it to come back, because it can't come back on the lawyer if the client says, I didn't know what I was doing. So he wanted to make sure that all the I's were dotted, all the T's were crossed, and that Thug knew exactly what was going on.
Mm-hmm. And like Skylar said, it probably would have been longer if Thug would have stayed in the case. Do you think they would have been found guilty of RICO if the others didn't plea out? It's impossible to know. I don't think that it's impossible to know, but I would say if they're willing to say not guilty on these charges, I think that's what the verdict would have been if I had to guess.
Absolutely. Because again, think about a RICO jury instruction. A RICO jury instruction is a conspiracy. This was a RICO conspiracy, which meant that everybody was in the group. So if these guys are not guilty, there's a good chance everybody is not guilty because it's a conspiracy charge. It's the essence of the charge is an agreement to commit a crime. So if these guys didn't agree to commit a crime, then probably nobody agreed to commit a crime. I believe it would have been a not guilty all the way around.
Mm-hmm. Gypsy Soul said, Peter, because of you and Papa T, I voted for every single seat for judge this year for the first time, and I'm almost 50. Well, it is important. So I'm glad you did. You did a service to yourself and to society. Amy said, if Thug has a minor parole violation and ends up in front of Judge Whitaker, will this verdict go into her decision on the penalty?
Yes. I mean, because when she's sentencing Thug, she's going to be sentencing him for the original crime. So yes, it's going to have an impact on her. Again, I don't know how much, and I think it depends on what the violation is.
There's some other questions I'm going to save for when we get a little bit later, but all right, let's hear from Young Thug's dad here and see what again, I haven't watched this, so I don't know what his reaction is.
You know what I'm saying? He did what he felt like he wanted to do. So
he's talking about Young Thug did what he felt like he wanted to do.
He's grown. He made his own decision.
Have you spoken to him since this happened?
Yeah.
If so, what was his reaction to today's verdict?
Today? No, I haven't spoken to him today.
How is he doing?
He's doing great. He's doing great. Honestly, he's doing great. So he don't have a word. You know, we still fight. We still fighting out as well. It's not over for us. Huh? It's not over for us because I got another son and a grandson that was arrested about this case that I'm still fighting for.
You've been an outspoken critic of Gotti DA's office. In light of today's verdict, I got a message for them?
I still feel the same way about the DA office. It's a piece of shit. So, you know, we got to get those people out of there. If we want to continue to have justice, we got to get them out of there.
I want to say that I'm thankful. I stood down, 10 toes down every day, day in, day out. I stood by my son. It was his decision to not take the plea. And I said, whatever you want to do, I want to do. He said, no, I ain't taking the plea. He didn't take it. And we stood down. I prayed. I thank God for all the supporters all over the world. People who were supporting me, texting me, DMing me. I appreciate the love, and the love. All the prayer warriors, I'm thankful. God is good. He did his big one. They used my son rap lyrics against him. How dare they do that? It's a freedom of speech. They just did so much corruptness in this case. And they threw things against the wall and it didn't stick. I'm thankful. I'm grateful. I just got so much emotion right now. I'm full. Day in, day out, going to work, having a personal life, coming back down here, sleeping in the courtroom. They having to wake me up, doing this thing over and over and over again repetitiously. Every day. My son stood up 30 months. My son stood up. And we was victorious. I'm thankful to God that a mother love went beyond the world. And I'm thankful. I never gave up on my son. Never. He said, Mama, I'm not taking it. I'm standing up. And I stood right by him every day. Every day of the week, I stood by my child. And he said, no. And I said, I'm going to stand with you. I'm going to stand with you to the end. And we stood down to the end. You never give up. No matter what's thrown against you, you never give up. Never. And he stood down. And I'm right here every day. Every day I stood up with him. Every night I prayed with him. And I told him, son, this is bigger than you. This is bigger than you. And I'm thankful to the people all over the world that prayed, gave me encouragement. He gave me encouragement. Big Jeff, Miss Sylvia, everybody around me. Taylor, Cole, I got so many people, my family members in Miami, Florida. Everybody that gave me hope and encouragement. And Monte stood every day. He watched them say bad things about him and disgrace him. And I had him and I raised him. They divulged his character. They said bad things about him. But we got the victory. And in life, you never give up. Never. You never give up no matter how bad it looked. God said he'll make your enemy your footstool. I look to the hills where my help come from. I had bad days. I had good days. I had emotional days. But I damn if I was going to give up. And I'm thankful for everybody that's been around me in my life who encouraged me. I'm emotional beyond words. I am emotional beyond words, beyond measures. A mother love. I never will give up. And I taught him that to give up, never give up. No matter what the traditional system say about him, never get up.
What was kind of interesting about that is, we heard from one of the dads, one of the moms, and just how different it can be with dealing with different family members of defendants and what the emotion is like, how people can be pushed to their breaking point, how it becomes the biggest part of their life, the most important thing in their life. And I think you felt that from a mom's reaction to this, right? I mean, I think that was as pretty raw and emotional as you can get as to how they feel in this position. And like Young Thug's dad said, it's not over. There are other people still involved. And some of those people involved are defendants still waiting for their trial to happen. And they had a little mini hearing today that I wanted to watch a few minutes of and kind of get your reaction about what's next for them, how this may affect them, right? Because if you're sitting there, you're waiting to get tried. If all of these defendants would have been found guilty by a jury, right? Let's just pretend in pretend world that they all get convicted of RICO. They're all guilty. Well, you're going to trial. You're probably a lot more nervous, right? The state just proved their case to a jury. Chances are they're going to prove a very similar case against you. And that would probably scare you a little bit as a defendant, as a criminal defense attorney. But that's not what happened. So when something like this happens, when everybody's given a sweetheart deal or basically a not guilty verdict, how does that affect you if you're representing a co-defendant coming in a trial later after something like this drops today?
You mean the fact that I'm waiting for my client's trial?
Correct.
Well, it gives me some additional arguments to go back to the state attorney's office and sit down with them again and say, look, I don't need a sweetheart deal. I think you guys just need to drop all these charges and forget about it. And then we just go our separate ways. No skin off your nose, no skin off mine. It's all done. I mean, let's face it. These guys have been in jail for 2 years. You guys got a pound of flesh from my client. He's got 2 years in prison. You're not going to really gain anything. You've seen this judge's attitude. Do you really think that you're going to try this case and really get any more from my client than she gave to the original clients that you had trial for 10 months? So it's time for you guys to step back, stop being so emotionally involved in this case and make the right logical decision for you and for the people of Georgia.
So your first thought would be to use it to get them to drop the charges.
Absolutely.
I think it's unlikely that they would drop the charges, although that is a possibility. I think it's more likely sweetheart deals may be offered and you would use this as much leverage as you possibly could, because the state would also have, listen, the only reason they got these 2 not guilty verdicts, first off, we got 1 guilty, but the rest of them, if I'm pretending to be the state, the rest not guilty is fine, but we also got plea deals from multiple defendants. We will offer you something similar to what we offered them. And that at least makes the state look better than either going to trial and losing again or having people complain about how much money is being spent. And it just is, where does the rubber meet the road? Right.
Right. But you've got, again, as a defense lawyer, again, it's like the art of the deal. When you go in there, what you ask for is charges to be dropped. That's where you start.
Sure.
And you demand that they be dropped. You show them there's reasons for it to be dropped. And then maybe you get the best deal that you possibly can for your client. I really think that I can't see any of these guys going to prison beyond what they've already served, even the new guys, seeing the way that the judge sentences, and no matter what the convictions were, she's not going to give them any more jail time than the 2 years they've served, and maybe she'll give them probation, but that's going to be it. So the state's got to realize Miss Love, again, realize she's a boss. I mean, other than the state attorney herself, Miss Love is the highest ranking person in that office. So she's a decision maker. And number one, does she want to try this case again? I can't imagine that she does. Unless she's really just such a glutton for punishment, I can't imagine she wants to try this case again. Secondly, there are budgets to consider. She is the chief assistant, so she has some budgetary responsibility. Does she want to spend the prosecution budget on this one case rather than all the other crimes that are being committed in her jurisdiction in that county? So she's got to make that kind of decision to dedicate the resources again for 10 months. So she's got to sit down and talk about that. Unless she's emotionally involved in this, which I hope she's not, she'll make a wise decision. And these cases will not go to trial. These other cases.
You don't think so?
No.
Oh, interesting.
I don't.
A little spice. Okay. Well, let's listen to this hearing because the judge wants these trials to happen very quickly. So let's take a listen.
And so before we were officially on the record with the court reporter, I had let everybody know about the verdict that it had been.
By the way, after we listen to this and continuing discussing these defendants, Kelsey just sent me a 1 minute video of juror number 56 making a comment. So we'll listen to that at the very end. But that's probably all we're going to have time to listen to.
I'd like to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what he says. I haven't listened to it.
Returned in the trial that was ongoing until a few minutes ago in Mr. Kendrick and Mr. Stillwell's case. And it may be that new offers will be forthcoming to some or all of you. It may not be. I don't know. That is not for me to decide. That is.
She's like, well, I'm not saying it has to happen like that, but even the judge thinks that with this new information of these not guilty verdicts, that new offers may be coming.
Is for the state to decide. And the charges against some of you are very serious. Some of you are charged with murders. Some of you are charged with other very serious felonies. Some of you are just charged with RICO or gang counts. Those are serious as well. I don't know if the state is going to regroup and take a new tack. I have no idea. I would imagine they'll be talking. And I'm just wondering if it might be a good idea to set maybe a new date for a final plea again. I know y'all had a final plea once in front of a senior judge. It wasn't the judge that was going to preside over the trials. I'm happy to do that, but I kind of am going to need to know sort of how each of these cases is going to progress, if there are going to be charges dropped or null pros, if the state is going to move forward with everything. And if there isn't resolution, then we are going to need to sort out a trial calendar, the time needed to try the case, whether there are any outstanding motions that need to be handled prior to a trial. And then if it's going to be a trial, any motions in limine, and at some point get proposed jury questionnaires and things like that. And it may be that it's a little too early, given the latest developments, for the state to be able to have any answers for that. I see that Mr. Gotti has been abandoned at council table and is sitting there all by himself, having been dragged into the case fairly late in the game.
She's like, look, they all dragged you in and left you here by yourself.
Much like me. But Mr. Gotti, do you know the answer to any of the Questions on how the state might intend to proceed?
I think some of your assumptions are probably correct. I think a new date in the future, the near future, would be the most beneficial for all parties to make sure that we're all on the same page. And if there are going to be any new updated offers, we can get those a little time to get those to council.
All right, so let's look at a calendar. Yes. Sure.
We were very close to a resolution today that was essentially a time-served offer and someone who's been in custody for 18 months. We have asked for a slight modification to that offer. I would really like, if possible, because I will go into legislative session too.
Sure.
It's the holidays, and if he is this close to a time-served offer, I would like some consideration to perhaps get his offer done today. If the state feels like they can do it, I know Adrienne is gone. She's left Mr. Gotti.
Sometimes when you're in the courtroom discussing offers, you have the judge, you have the state. The judge can help you move that along when the state can sometimes grab their feet. But at least one defendant looking at a time-served offer. That's what I would expect is some time-served offers. We'll see if any of the charges just get dismissed, like you're saying, or dropped, if they can use this as leverage. But that was interesting to hear.
Here, but I've been texting with her. We're very close to her.
Okay, and that's fine with me, and I'm here all day, and I'm willing to entertain anybody's offers. So,
I have no issue. In my, I guess, communication with Ms. Miller, I don't know if we're right there as it relates to the updated offer.
okay.
But I think if your honor is available this week at another time, there's a court appearance that we can do, whether it be via Zoom to take a plea. It sounds like the time is not the issue, it's the specific charges.
Okay, so, and I would assume all of the attorneys know what the pleas were for Mr. Nichols, Mr. Huey, and Mr. Ryan as well. I can certainly be available tomorrow. If you will recall our discussions at the bench, I'm not sure about my availability after that.
Okay.
But yeah, certainly, y'all work on that. And like I said, I'll be here all day tomorrow, and on and off. I have a couple of other things on my calendar tomorrow, but should be here for most of the day tomorrow as well. Does anybody else have an offer outstanding, or is everybody wanting to sort of wait on what might be coming forth new? Everybody wants to wait. I would.
Everybody wants to wait. What are the new offers after the not guilty verdicts, huh? That's what everybody wants to wait for.
I would too. Okay.
The judge says, I would too.
Is it premature to discuss length of trial if there is going to be a trial for any of these defendants? And if it is, that's fine. We can reconvene.
I mean, I think it would, my estimation would be no more than 90 days. That would be my estimation.
So the state thinks that the next trial will be no more than 90 days. Look at the judge's face. That should almost scare the defendants, because it's like, have they actually gotten it together? Are they going to be able to present the case in a way that is streamlined and understandable by a jury? What do you think about that?
He's just throwing that out there. Remember now, everybody's abandoned him. They just threw him into that chair. You know, all the prosecutors, lawyers that were there, they're gone. They left the room. So this guy just sitting there, I think he's just talking on top of his head.
Well, I also think that may indicate what you're saying, that there ain't going to be a trial. So eventually they look through their calendars, and she thinks February of 2025 is when they're going to start this trial. One of the poor lawyers is like, Judge, I just got appointed this case. She's like, that's plenty of time. You're a defense lawyer. It's plenty of time for you to get ready. So we'll see. That seems tough. But February is when they're looking to try the remaining defendants. So we will see what that looks like and what that ends up meaning if they are to go. I expect we are going to hear a lot about plea offers and things of that nature. Um, let me see if I can. Okay. So Thugger Daily is who tweeted this. Let me get it set up here so we can watch this little clip of a defendant. I'm sorry, of a juror. And I have not watched this. So here we go. Instant reactions.
I can file a report that I was one of the jurors for the YSL court case here in the state of Georgia, the longest court case in the state history. We just wrapped up a few hours ago, delivered the verdict for two of the remaining individuals. A long time, a year and change. It took us about 4 or 5 days to deliberate, and now we can get back to our normal lives. I talked to my sister not too long ago. I'm the infamous juror number 56, as well as the Foreman, and we'll talk more about this court case at some other point. In the meantime, I'm going to relax, get my life back to normal, my regular routine, and get back into friendly skies and travel around the world. And yeah, we'll talk soon. All right. I can file a report that.
All right. So it was nothing. All right. So people are going to be talking about this case. That's the one thing I think we can learn from that is juror number 56, probably other jurors. I don't know if there's agreement. Almost every jury nowadays has a group chat where they're sitting and talking to each other. But I think what this does indicate is we are going to hear from these jurors eventually. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And there are going to be some books and there's going to be some newspaper articles, a newspaper interview. I guarantee you there's going to be at least one juror that's going to write a book.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Or start a YouTube channel or something like that. So juror number 6, I guess, is the one that emailed the judge saying he can no longer be unbiased due to the length of the trial and how the state has presented it. So that is interesting. I'm sure he's going to have more to say about that. And then he ends up being the Foreman, which
is really interesting. Really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Mostly not guilty verdicts. Probably a just ending to a very wild case, but it doesn't seem like it's over. Any final thoughts that you've got on this case, this trial, what it means for any of the defendants, the lawyers? Somebody did ask earlier, can any of the co-defendants waiting for trial hire any of the lawyers that have already tried the case to be their lawyer?
Yes, if the client is not going to be a witness in the case, I think they could.
Everybody would have to waive conflict. They'd have to
Right.
make sure nobody was going to even potentially be a witness, not on the witness list. I think it probably is not a good idea. I think it would probably be tough to create. It would probably be an unwaivable conflict at some point because of all the different conspiracies and allegations.
Here's an interesting thought. They're found not guilty now, so they don't have a Fifth Amendment right anymore. What if the state subpoenaed those defendants and put them before the grand jury and made them testify? That could happen.
The way this has gone, I think they would testify a lot of, I don't remember, I don't know.
Yeah, they learned from Woody.
That would be my guess. But yeah, there's just unimaginable options that can happen here in this case. And we'll continue to watch. We'll continue to follow. Thanks for joining me, Dad. Thanks for everybody. Oh, we have a couple other questions here. Chef's Kiss. Do you think it was unfair that Judge W didn't release juror number 56 after he said he would be biased against the state?
I think I think what the reason that the 56 stayed is I think he probably said at some point, I could still be fair. He probably relented at some point or equivocated at some point. That's why she left him on.
It's also different, just FYI, for somebody to start to have a lean during the trial versus prior to being on a jury. So there is a difference there as well, because maybe you could argue what he was saying is reasonable doubt. That's something we argue as reasonable doubt, right? The way the evidence was presented, the lacking evidence, the contradictions in the evidence. So if somebody's like, I would vote not guilty because of contradictions of the evidence, you can't be like, well, then you got to get off this jury. So you have to handle it with kid gloves when it comes to juror statements. Jury said YSL is not a gang. Can thug say slime or slat now? I don't know the answer to this. I don't know what all these words mean. I don't know what the state's going to try to prove they mean. I don't know what law enforcement's going to try to prove they mean. If it was me and I was on probation with these types of parameters, I would stay as far away from it as I could. Do you have any thoughts on that? All right, you take
that.
Chaos in the justice system. How does it work now civilly with Young Thug's property since not guilty? Will the prosecution be held liable for missing items?
I don't know. I mean, is stuff missing?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Neither of us probably know the facts surrounding this. Was stuff destroyed? Does he allege it was stolen? Is it just, if there's stuff missing that he can't prove was there before law enforcement came or was lost with law enforcement? Kelsey just said a watch is missing. I don't know the details about it. He would have to still prove that it was the state's fault or they lost it, stole it, broke it, whatever it may be. I don't know the answer to that, so I can't really answer. But let me ask you this question, which is kind of along the same lines. Everybody asks, well, now that they're not guilty, can these defendants sue for malicious prosecution or sue law enforcement? Is there any civil legal recourse now that they've been found not guilty?
No.
Usually not, unless obviously something during the trial comes out that they were committing fraud and they knew these guys were not guilty and continue to push forward. But generally speaking,
right. Generally speaking, just getting a not guilty verdict does not entitle you to sue anybody. So, again, absence fraud or any kind of deliberate prosecutorial fraud. But, people are found not guilty all the time. Just think about it. If everybody who's found not guilty could sue the state, everybody's taxes would go up.
And that's the point, is you want them to arrest and try people that commit crimes. And if, once in a while they're not guilty, you can't just sue every single time. Like you said, that just wouldn't work. People are saying it was a $500,000 watch. Woof. That's not great. All right. I think we answered most of the questions. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Make sure you hit that like button if you have not already. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel because it doesn't seem like we're quite done with this case that lasts forever. Dad, thanks again for joining me. Till next time, we're out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.